Hey, what's going on, guys? So First Light just got update 1.0.4, and this one is one of those patches that does a ton of behind-the-scenes cleanup without really changing the core game in some giant flashy way. A huge part of the patch is stability, and that is the kind of thing people usually feel immediately, even if they do not notice every individual fix. They added memory optimizations to help reduce out-of-memory crashes, which is a big deal because once a game starts running into memory trouble, everything else can unravel fast. They also fixed a crash tied to profile data when launching the game, which is exactly the sort of issue that can ruin someone's first boot or make the whole thing feel broken before they even get going. On PC, they dealt with corrupted save data crashes too, and that one matters a lot because it is not just about crashing once. It could turn into this awful situation where the game keeps crashing on startup and never really lets you in. That kind of fix is one of those quiet lifesavers that people appreciate way more than they realize at first. There are also a bunch of mission-specific crash fixes in here, and those are always welcome because nothing kills momentum faster than finally making it through a tense sequence, only to have the game fall apart at exactly the wrong time. One crash could happen in the intro cinematic of Against the Odds. Another could happen during All the Time in the World, when resuming a checkpoint after pausing and leaving the game in the background, and there was even a rare out-of-memory crash on Xbox Series S during a mission tradition after long play sessions. That last one is especially rough because it sounds like the kind of bug that only shows up after a lot of time has already been invested, which makes it even more annoying when it happens. They also fixed a crash on PlayStation 5 Pro when buying multiple gadget upgrades in tactical simulation, so that part of the game is getting some attention too. Then there's the gameplay side, and this is where the patch starts to sound like a checklist of problems people would absolutely complain about online. One of the biggest fixes is the EULA connection loop on PS5, where the game could get stuck on a connecting screen after accepting the agreement on first boot. That is such a bad first impression bug because it does not matter how good the game is if it traps people before they even get in. They also fixed the forcing locomotion issue in The Past Never Dies, where getting shot could leave Bond locked in place. That kind of bug sounds almost funny when you first read it, but in the middle of a mission, it would be wildly frustrating. And then there are the progression blockers, which are probably the most important fixes in the whole patch for a lot of players. There is a fix for Against the Odds, where moving a guard away from their normal spot could stop players from interacting with hostages and progressing. There is another fix in The Past Never Dies, where interacting with photos at the same time as Greenway could make the item unreachable. They also addressed an issue in MI6 where you could access the elevator shaft too early, and another where Q could get stuck inside the environment after skipping a cinematic. Those are the kinds of bugs that completely break the flow of a mission and sometimes even force someone to reload a save or start over from a checkpoint they did not want to revisit. Nightfall got a fix for an out-of-bounds issue during the penthouse escape sequence. Time to Die had a docked boat problem at the start of the mission and a separate quarry progression blocker. A New Home got a fix for the Q-Watch not generating supplies correctly during the advanced training sequence in Malta. The Heart of the Matter had a gadget delay issue where devices would activate late and the delay could carry into later missions. That is a lot of mission-specific cleanup, and it tells you the team is really going after the places where players get stuck. There is also a pretty important save-related issue on PlayStation 5, where carrying more than one primary weapon could lead to save corruption and even infinite loading when reloading checkpoints. That is the kind of thing that sounds easy to overlook until it ruins somebody's file, so it is good that it got addressed. On top of that, they fixed the challenge issue in For England, where bring a fist to a gunfight could complete incorrectly when using firearms. And on PC, they fixed the tax sim challenge, Iron It Out, not unlocking properly. These are not giant headline-style fixes, but anyone chasing completion is going to care a lot. The cinematic and animation fixes are a nice touch too. They cleaned up Bond snapping briefly out of position in a cinematic in Against the Odds, and they fixed Greenway's arm positioning during dialogue in The Past Never Dies. There is also a fix for NPC clothing and body parts clipping or disappearing in crowded areas, which is one of those visual problems that can break immersion immediately even if it does not affect gameplay at all. They even adjusted Bond's model visuals during training cinematics in The Needle's Eye. So yeah, this patch is not just about making the game less crash-prone. It is also about making the world feel a little more stable and less rough around the edges. The UI and online fixes are worth mentioning too. On Epic Games Store, the saving icon could apparently stay on screen forever until a restart, which would drive anyone crazy after a while. On PlayStation 5 Pro, friends' scores were not appearing correctly in tactical simulation leaderboards, and the world leaderboard position display could also show the wrong ranking. On PC, rebinding controls would not show up in the HUD until a checkpoint reload, which is one of those annoying little things that makes you wonder whether the game actually registered your change. None of these are massive system-breaking bugs, but they all add up, and fixing them makes the whole experience feel a lot cleaner. Achievements got a serious pass too, and that is great news for completionists. Several collectible-based unlocks were broken, including ones tied to collectibles, legacy items, play cards, mementos, intel items, and postcards. So if somebody did everything the game asked for and still did not get the reward, that should be much less of a headache now. There is nothing worse than finishing a long checklist and then getting robbed by a bug at the very end, so it is nice to see those sorted out. Performance-wise, the patch seems to be doing some important long-term work. On PC, some systems were defaulting to a low-power graphics card, which would obviously lead to poor performance even if the hardware could do much better. That has been fixed, and that alone could make a huge difference for players who were wondering why the game felt weaker than it should. They also fixed incorrect DLS upscaling settings on launch, which matters because that can affect how the game looks and performs right away. Memory handling for ragdolls was improved, and PlayStation 5 memory usage was optimized too. That is the kind of maintenance that might not sound exciting at first, but it can help prevent all kinds of weird problems from building up over longer sessions. Localization also got some attention, with Korean and simplified Chinese improvements, plus a typo fix in English dialogue during a night out. That might seem minor compared to crash fixes, but language clarity matters, especially when the game is asking players to follow mission details, interact with gadgets, or make sense of dialogue in the middle of a fast-moving scene. Little translation cleanup can actually make the whole thing feel much better to play. There is also a fix for IOI account rewards on PS5, where certain rewards would not appear after redeeming the code. So if somebody was expecting a bonus and never saw it show up in-game, that issue should be less likely now. That is a nice quality of life fix, especially for players who were thinking they had done something wrong when really the problem was on the game side. Now, even with all of that, there are still some known issues floating around in the latest build, and it is worth keeping those in mind. HDR turning off after exiting the game is still a thing on PC, and the workaround is to turn it back on manually after restarting. The MI6 shooting range still has a problem where players cannot shoot on PC and PS5, and there is no workaround for that yet. On Xbox Series X, some players are still running into controller input not being recognized on the start screen. There are also ongoing problems with Legacy and Collector's Edition content not being granted properly, save failed notifications on PC, IOI account sign-in issues, audio crackling on PC and PS5, blurry low-resolution textures in Mauritania on PS5 Pro, and DualSense features not being fully supported on PC. So this patch definitely helps, but it is not the final word on every problem the game has right now. What stands out to me most is that this update feels like a real cleanup patch, not the kind that changes the identity of the game, not the kind that adds a bunch of new stuff for the sake of it, but the kind that removes friction. Fewer crashes, fewer stuck missions, better performance, better saves, better achievement tracking, better platform behavior. That is the stuff that keeps a game in good shape after launch. And it matters a lot more than people give it credit for when they are not the ones getting stuck on a broken objective or watching a save fail right before a long session ends. So yeah, this is the sort of update that probably will not get the loudest reaction, but for a lot of players, it is going to be the one that makes First Light feel noticeably better to actually play.